What are the things that we could focus on in 40k to really make a difference to our games as we move into 2025? Hello and welcome to Epic Flail 40k Tactics. My name's Luke, and this week I've been mostly focusing on the little things that can make the biggest difference when it comes to 40k. At the end of one year and the beginning of another, there are often moments of reflection and hopefully a positive look out to the year ahead. And so I had a little think and I've come up with the 10 most important and impactful things that we can take forward into 2025 based on my own reflections of how I've got better at the game and some things throughout this year that I've been focusing on. By the end of this video, you'll have some really great tangible things that you can implement to improve your games of 40k. Let's get started. Right off the bat, it's to do with not being lazy. I myself have been guilty of this. And actually, ironically, it's often not because I'm actually lazy, but because I don't always have enough time to do my homework, keep abreast of the meta, keep on top of updates and changes. I run events, I make content, I also play the game. I've got 2 kids, I have a full-time job. There is a lot that fills up my time. And so sometimes I miss things in the 40k world and I don't always make the time to read updates as well as I should. There are lots of people that will be in the same boat, and it is not always easy to keep on top of things. It's a real big thing I've tried to make time for, but it was a massive failing. I ran an event that I was actually able to play in this time, and I took Gene Stealer Cults and I went 4-1. Really pleased with how I did, but the game I lost, my mind was blown by this Deathwatch army that I just didn't know anything about. My opponent basically had to tell me everything that they did because I hold my hands up. I skimmed the changes to Imperial Agents and Deathwatch and all that stuff. Inquisition on a personal level didn't really interest or excite me, and so I just didn't really pay any attention, and that's a massive mistake. That's something that literally contributed to me losing a game in a tournament. If I was trying to win that event, then that's on me, and it's a really good and important reflection and something that I'm taking forward into the new year, to not be lazy on the stuff that doesn't necessarily excite me about the game. If I'm wanting to do better, improve more, then put the time in. We don't have to memorize every last thing, read every resource cover to cover, but I certainly could have done more to learn about that faction. And I think most people, if we really reflect, could probably do a little bit more to brush up on certain factions. And if there's a faction that you know nothing about, then definitely make an effort to get on Warpedia, learn some things about what the faction does at a high level so you can reduce your chances of any gotcha moments. So yeah, number 1, brush up on your homework. Number 2 is practice efficiencies. I mentioned I'm a busy guy, so something that I lean quite heavily on is netlisting and getting army lists that others have designed, because the one thing I don't have a lot of is time. And that is really useful to be able to find lists that I know have done well at events and people have practiced and people are using, and almost benefit from their experience to pick up that list and use it myself. And that is an example of how I've been efficient in my list construction. And if you're someone who likes to brew lists themselves and create, test things out, that's fantastic. It's a really big part of the hobby. But if we're trying to be efficient with our time to get the most out of our hobby time, agonizing over lists, writing lists, spending games where we're toying with ideas might not be the best use of our time. Time that could be better spent just practicing with a list that we know is good. And finding efficiencies can also mean games as well. So think about ways to get faster at rolling dice, having batches set out in front of you ready to roll out in numbers, using movement trays, learning rules ahead of time. All these kind of things can help with getting through games quickly, efficiently, reducing mental load, which is super important. Number 3 is about refining list building. So whilst I will often play test net lists and practice with them, I will try to refine them even further, add or remove things to test ideas out to make changes that fit my playstyle. Think about how I can incorporate redundancy, chaff or scoring units, for example, or maybe there's synergies that I like that could be added in if swapping out units. Net listing is great, but if you're someone who enjoys building their own lists, we should always be challenging ourselves to think about how we can constantly be refining our armies and evaluating how well units are doing. And to be fair, that's true even with net lists as well. Like very rarely I'll take an army list and think, yes, that's perfect, that's exactly how I want to play it. I'll always be scrutinizing it in a constructive way because I want to try and get the most out of the games that I'm playing. Whether we've started with a meta list or a list we've designed ourselves, constantly evaluating our armies and reflecting on how they perform so that we're continuously adapting, evolving and seeking improvements, seeing it as a continual process. It's a really important thing I've found to have at the forefront of our minds and a real key thing to be thinking about if improvement is a goal that we have moving into 2025. Next up is an oldie but a goodie, deployment. I've made videos about this. We need to practice deploying with intent, planning moves multiple turns ahead, accounting for terrain, and adapting deployment to counter what our opponent is bringing to the table. I don't want to talk at length about deployment because it's something I've mentioned in the past, but it is such an important element to get right in a game that it bears repeating. And if it's something that you find that you struggle with, then you want to be having this as a key focus, really be reflecting on the mistakes that you make in deployment and how you can move away from those in future. Give it the attention it deserves in 2025. Point number 5 is something that I've struggled with at times in games over the last year. If a game starts to run away from me, then I will almost start to spiral in terms of analysis paralysis, focus on the ways I have at my disposal to get back into the game. And then every decision point becomes agonizing as I think, right, what's the best thing that I can do here? And so I have to try to remind myself to try to focus on the decisions that matter the most and not get so hung up on every decision, but what are the ones that are impacting on the scoreboard. They're the things that can really impact our scores in a game if we're making the wrong judgment or not focusing on the scores, objectives, that sort of thing. And so any reflections you might have on your own decision-making processes or the decisions that you make in the game, how you're making them, the speed at which you're making them are going to be really important, because whilst we don't want to be making the wrong decisions in a game, we also don't want to be struck by indecision. Just want to take a moment to make you aware of Epic Flail HQ. Over on Epic Flail HQ, we have members-only content, tactics videos, much like this one, and you can get access to that content for just $2.99 a month. There's a whole variety of content from podcasts, reflections, tactics videos, in addition to the fact that you'll be supporting the channel that can bring you UKTC coverage. And not only that, we have an awesome Discord that is getting bigger and bigger with every passing month. If you're enjoying this kind of content or the UKTC streams, check out Epic Flail HQ and become a member today. Number 6 is command point usage. Command points are a resource. We often need to be disciplined with how we use them. It's so frustrating if we use a CP that we needed for a later part of the turn, forgetting about a key buff, Overwatch, fights first, tank shock, whatever it might be. I have certainly had poor turns or inefficient scoring because I have mismanaged my CP. And it's a really common focus area for a lot of players. Nailing down the high value strats for our faction and how situational or common their usage cases might be, and identifying how we need to budget our CP over the next couple of turns is really key to that, maximizing our CP. Links into number 7, which is the fundamentals, focusing on the fundamentals, avoiding sloppy play. I'm quite hot on intent and playing to intent in games, and so this has been a really positive reflection on me that I very rarely, if ever, get into confusing discussions with my opponents or, dare I say, arguments over what's what. Quite good at being clear in the game and making sure my opponent understands what it is that I'm talking about. And a big part of that is in-game fundamentals, improving our accuracy in measurement and movement, familiarizing ourselves with the core rules, phase mechanics, reducing mistakes by creating good habits and good play. And if there's something that seems new to you, these kind of things, or you know that there might be a gap in elements of that in your game, then this one should be up there with things to focus on moving into 2025, as this is all stuff that's core to the game and will have the added bonus of making you have a much more pleasant and positive experience and interaction with your opponent as well. Number 8 is resilience. Another positive one for me. I feel like I've been very resilient this year playing the game. Don't often get annoyed in games that much. I have in the past. I've touched on it on the channel before. We all can sometimes get grumpy, dare I say it, salty in a game, and I haven't done that this year. I've been really good, built some solid resilience, and a lot of that has been focusing on a growth mindset, improvement over time, the constructive reflection as well on losses to identify what I need to do differently. Focusing on the things that I have agency over, control over, has really helped to build that resilience and give myself something positive to focus on rather than bemoaning the dice or a matchup or a faction's power level, etc. And has meant for a much more pleasant playing experience, practically avoiding tilt altogether, treating each game as a learning experience, not just a win-lose scenario, is a mindset shift that I thoroughly recommend and something that will be a positive step for every player to take forward into 2025. And an extension of one of the earlier ones that I talked about is deepening our understanding of our own faction, really paying attention to what our individual units are capable of and what they're not, nailing down what our expected outputs are on any given unit, developing mental shortcuts, plans with our army, build our army knowledge. When we're getting reps with our army, really focus on absorbing and learning as much as possible about how our army functions so that we can take that away into our next games. This will help with almost every decision-making process that we will then be met with as we start playing other games, running into trouble and having these difficult decision points, because we will simply have built up a good knowledge base of how to answer various questions, threats in games as they emerge. Number 10 is seek out competitive play. Join local events or leagues to gain experience against a breadth of players and leverage those interactions to get feedback on how you're playing. Seek out and engage with high-level players through streams or videos and learn from their experience. Be a sponge and just soak up as much knowledge in that way as you can. These are my top 10 points that I would encourage anyone to focus on as we move into the new year, if improving 40k is on your to-do list. The one that I'm particularly proud of is how I've dealt with tilt, because in the past I have got a bit grumpy, never at any players, sort of at myself and things that I might have done wrong and beating myself up. And so it's really pleasing to reflect on this year. I've really reduced that. It's largely down to the mindset shift that I've had, that I talk about a lot more in this video here. And so if tilting is something that you find yourself doing more often than you'd like, then this video is definitely something that's going to be useful to you. In the meantime, thanks very much for watching. Keep rolling those dice and stay tuned for more.